Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Veblen Board Development Program podcast. Our podcast, Candid Coffee with Tokeshia Schroeder, today. I'm your host for today, Arvashni Seeripat, and over the next couple of weeks, I will be joined by my co-hosts, Payal Walker, Ramesh Nair, and the amazing Tokeshia Schroeder, to take you through a journey of really understanding and introducing you to highly talented people like you and I that have secured either board advisory roles or non-executive director roles. Now, if you are like me, you've asked the question as you've advanced in your career, you've asked the question, how can I do more in service of the industry that I participate in? Or you're asking, how can I bring more value to the industry I participate in? And the flip side of that is, can I actually bring value to the industry I participate in? All of those things are happening at the same time. The intention of this podcast is introduce you to people that have asked those very same questions and have been able to answer them. And so that's what we are going to be doing today. These folks that we've introduced you to have asked, can I do more for the industry? How do I bring more value? And the thing is, they have landed these board roles, either in advisory or non-executive director. So what are we going to do over the next couple of months? We're going to pick their brains. We're going to learn a little bit about them. We're going to learn how did they do it, number one. We're going to learn what did they learn along their journey, and what did they wish they knew as they were embarking upon this journey as well. Hopefully, we will get some nuggets of wisdom from them that we can help shape our own success path. And that will be the objective of the podcast over the next couple of months. Now that you know what this podcast is all about, I think we should jump into our first guest, because I think I've spoken a lot thus far. And I want to, before we talk to Tokeshia and hear from her, I want to introduce you to this amazing individual that I've gotten to know over the last couple of weeks. So Tokeshia is a finance and operations leader that has worked in Fortune 500 companies. Now, what I have found particularly interesting about Tokeshia is she's taken this incredible knowledge that she has, expertise and experience that she's built over this period of time, and transitioned it and applied it to startups. And what I thought was really interesting about that is, why should all this knowledge and expertise only sit in private Fortune 500 companies? And Tokeshia is a living example of transferring skills to where it is needed the most. So she's really rode this gambit from micro, as in startup, to macro, as in Fortune 500. Now, as I've gotten to know Tokeshia over the last couple of weeks, a couple of things have struck me about her. She's tenacious. She'll tell you a little bit about her story as we go through. She's incredibly resilient, highly determined. But what I have been drawn to with Tokeshia is her humanity. Tokeshia understands and seeks to understand how the decisions we make impact others. And that's why she is so highly sought after in board roles, because she can understand what it means, the decisions that get made, the guidance that is given, what the impact is on both customers, associates who work in that company, but also shareholders, right? Even be thinking about PLCs as well. And then when I had asked Tokeshia, what is most important to you? She had said, my time. My time is most important. Because where I put my time, my son, my husband, my family, indicates where I see lots and lots of value. And that is really interesting, because when we talk to Tokeshia, we will hear a little bit more about why time matters to her and how she prioritizes her time in service of boards. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Tokeshia Schroeder. Tokeshia, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on. That's a very, very nice, warm, and wonderful welcome. I appreciate that.
Well, you are warm and wonderful yourself, so you deserve every bit of the welcome. So Tokeshia, I'd love for you to tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so as you kind of alluded to, I work in the finance industry. I've been in finance and lending now for just over 20 years. I started in this industry, graduated from college at a really difficult time. It was the time of, 9/11 had just happened, Arthur Andersen, Enron, all of those things were happening. So the economy was in a really weird space. And my degree was in healthcare. and that was just a segment of the population, just really had a hard time finding a job to do. And I was also really trying to kind of struggling at that time to figure out, like, is this really the path that I wanted to go down? And I had a friend of mine that was in the mortgage industry and was like, hey, just until you can find something more permanent, where you kind of figure things out and the economy gets kind of back on its feet, come work with me. And I got into mortgages. From there, I really worked my way up from the ground up, right? Like mine's a grassroots story of I started just doing basic data entry and was able to get promoted over the course of a year to a pretty high level position. As those of us that are dealing with mortgages in the States and even probably in the London space as well know that we've had some very interesting ups and downs and valleys in that industry. So I've joined and worked at a few different companies, but eventually led me to working at JP Morgan. And while I was there, I was really trying to figure out, I had been trying to get out of the mortgage industry or into something that I found a little bit more, challenging, that I could grow a little bit more in that space. And I happened to find my niche while I was there. Someone gave me the opportunity to work on operational business transformation and business analytics. And from there, I really grew that team and kind of grew into my own in that space. And, from there, was pretty much running, operations, updating our procedures, training, adding new automations and technologies into that space, working with my different partners within that group. And I really enjoyed what I was doing. But I think as many people find working in large corporations like that, you kind of get to a point where you reach a pinnacle in that. And I kind of felt for myself, I'm like, I'm a little young to be peaking in my career at that point in time. And I was very blessed to have people that I worked for, who worked above me in my organization, that were very young and intelligent people that, really did a lot to thrive. And, they were probably going to be there for a period of time. So opportunity fell into my lap to go start working at a very small fintech mortgage startup. And I went there and took on a little bit of a bigger role, be it at a smaller company. And I found that I really kind of liked, again, being able to be there and shape a company and, figure out how to build it out to, getting to that enterprise type level that's at like a JP Morgan and things like that. But working there, I kind of started to realize, we kind of talked about, my time and how I was spending it. Going downtown into the office every single day, kind of the hustle and bustle that comes to being a brand spanking new startup, was a little bit much. And then I had another opportunity come for the company I'm at right now, Happy Money, and moved over there where, I run their operations, front end operations, lending. So anytime from the time you apply for a loan to the time that loan closes, helping you make your payments, that's kind of what my scope of authority is in the company here. And then outside of, the working piece of this, like you mentioned, I'm a mom, I'm a wife. I have a fantastic group of friends, my family, lots of people I like to spend time with. I'm an avid reader. Love to read books, love to continue to learn. I always joke around that if I could be a professional student, I would be. I would love to have that job and continue to learn. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Awesome, Tokeshia. I mean, well, what an interesting career that you've had, and also, some of the decisions that you've made along the way. Has there been any significant event that has impacted the way you have, really thought about your career or thought about the decisions that you make?
Yeah, so I kind of was alluding to it in my introduction of myself, or going over my career overview. And that point when I was working at the last company, when you're working at startups, you have to understand that, like, that is a huge time commitment, especially when you have, an executive type role. I would, go downtown, get into work, around 8:30, and there'd be nights that I was there till 10, taking work home with me, things like that. And it really took me away from my family. And, one day I had, some people in town. So it was on multiple days that I was out late, I came home one day and, my son who, at the time was a teenager, well, he's still a teenager now, but, he's in high school. I think he's, junior, senior at that point in time. And he was really upset. And he had said to me, he's like, sometimes I just want you to be home. And for those that, know teenage boys or have teenage boys, that it's if they get to a point where they're expressing feelings like that and they feel that the way that they do, because, most of the time they're too busy in their rooms, ignoring everybody. That really impacted me. And that really was like, took me a minute or made me step back and really say like, okay, I am not putting my time and energy where I need it to be. Like, I don't think there are people who love working, but for the most part, you work to provide. I work hard to give my family things and provide for them. But is that really important, or is that the most important thing when really they just want your time? They want your energy. They want pieces of you. So it was really important to me, looking at that and saying like, okay, that was part of the catalyst of me moving to another job at another company. Is like I really needed to provide some more work-life balance, so I could give my kids, my husband, my family and friends, people who matter to me, the time and energy that I need. I had a friend one time, or friend slash coworker, tell me, no one at work is going to remember that you stayed here an extra hour to finish that project. It'll still be here tomorrow, but your kids are going to remember that you missed their recital, that you missed their concert, that you weren't at their game, or, you weren't around for dinner, something as simple as that. So that really, those two pieces had happened and like really kind of came together in my brain. I was like, okay, it's time for me to make a change, and look to do something different in my career. And then with that, it's really gotten me thinking, where do I want to be? What do I want to do when I grow up? Right? Like everyone goes through phases and stages in their careers. I'm still a little too early for retirement, but, kind of just trying to think of, what do I want that next phase of my career to look like? And that's kind of what started leading me to VDP and, trying to learn a little bit more about the board space.
Awesome. So with that, and these pivotal moments help us to move in directions that are more in keeping with what we want to achieve in our lives, right? And so you've just secured your first board advisory roles with TerraWorks. So Tokeshia, take us a little bit through how did you secure the board advisory role, and a little bit about TerraWorks itself as an organization.
Yeah, so this is definitely a testament to the networking ability that you obtain being part of the VDP program, right? So you come, there's a little bit of education to learn. You meet a lot of fantastic people, such as yourself, within this organization, and expand and grow your network. That's one of the big key cornerstones, I will say, of the VDP program, is having that right network, and being able to use that network to obtain board positions and figure out ways to move within different groups and organizations. And Coyote on the VDP program had an organization or a friend that he knew that, had started up TerraWorks and had reached out and said, hey, you guys are at a point in your business development where this might be a good thing for you to have and get some advisory board members. And they selected 3 of us to join, which is, fantastic and wonderful. TerraWorks is a great company. It's a little bit different than kind of where I sit right now. But where I do have experience working with that company would be in my globalization efforts I did at JP Morgan and here at Happy Money, where we kind of expand into different markets and areas outside of the US. So TerraWorks is really focused on finding opportunities for freelancers and connecting them with businesses with needs. So for me, working in a startup company, I know how difficult and challenging it can be to fill different roles within the organization. Like you might not have the opportunity to hire a marketing person or a graphic designer or things like that full time, but you want to contract with someone for a project or for a period of time to help you through a situation. And that's what TerraWorks is really there to do. It's to connect these freelance people with businesses. They're based in Africa. Africa does not currently have a company like this, whereas that is a little bit more there's a couple in the US. And they're looking now to expand into the US market, Canada, and Europe. So I'm really excited about that because, again, like as I mentioned, for me, work-life balance is really important. And a lot of freelance workers are really living that life and figuring out how to use their time and talents to support their ability to have more flexibility in their life and lead the lives that they want to live, while also providing a really good service to corporations or other businesses that have a need.
Awesome. So, Tokeshia, I think you alluded to it a little bit, but I'd like to take some time to go a little bit deeper into what in your experience do you think you would bring to TerraWorks to help them, in service of TerraWorks as well. So share with us how you thought about that and what you're hoping to bring to TerraWorks.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like right now, I'm in a stage where I'm still trying to understand exactly, more about their business. I'm in the listening and learning phase of working with TerraWorks. But, in talking with them, where we're really hoping is I can help them in the areas of finance, as someone who's worked with investors, obtaining investors to help support your work and continue to let you to move your business forward. I can help them in that space, also in, providing any other business financing that they're looking for, but also on the other spectrum as someone who has hired talent outside of the US and has gone through globalization, giving them the opportunity to understand how what they do could work in a US market, how they can appeal to different organizations and companies and continue to grow that business to find the opportunities for their freelancers.
Awesome. And I think that's such a great example of how skills become transferable, right? And how you start to then elevate the skills more from a guidance perspective as opposed to a doing perspective, as you would do in roles. Love that. So share with us as well, what have been some of your learnings? I know it's early stages, but what have been some of your learnings?
Well, there's one other thing that's really struck me in, my experience with TerraWorks and, talking to some other people in the Veblen program is, boards are all structured a little bit differently, especially kind of in these early stages for different companies where, as an entrepreneur, as someone in a startup, you might not know exactly how a, formal board would function. You don't have that experience. So you're kind of learning in that phase. And for some of us, we're learning kind of along with them as, for me personally, I've sat on the other side of a board seat. So I have an idea, someone who's presented to them, how they're structured, what they're looking for, how that meeting will go. But never on the other side and how those like behind closed door meetings sometimes go in that. So there are some that, don't do a formal group meeting with the board, but will meet with their board members individually and kind of work through a particular problem with them very specifically. So that's, I think, one of the biggest things that I've kind of learned kind of going through this whole program. And, the same thing that you learn, I think, anytime you start something new is you don't know what you don't know. So anytime you get into something, there's going to be lots of things that you realize that you need to continue to learn and observe and have never encountered before. So, that perpetual student mindset, that growth mindset is really important.
Awesome. And I love that, right? That perpetual student mindset. And you did say you could be a forever student. And so I think you're already living that purpose as well. Tokeshia, sometimes we go into things with preconceived ideas, right? So we have to unlearn what we thought or what we've learned in the past. Has there been anything that you've walked into within this advisory role that you've realized, I need to unlearn that?
Yes, I think one of the big things is, a lot of us coming into working with advisory boards or from our careers, we're executives, we're higher level people, we're managers of managers, and we're doers. So when you walk into a board position and sitting on that board in that seat, you're not really there to be a doer. And that's something to kind of emphasize in the learnings as you're going. You're there to listen, you're there to help guide, you're there to help, provide slightly more consultative feedback to the team, but you're not there to make major decisions for them. You're just kind of helping them out. And I think that has been a really big challenge that I've seen for a lot of people, to be able to come to a board meeting and listen, to understand, ask questions to understand, and to guide, instead of just wanting to jump in and solve all of the problems for people. So for me personally, there's a couple of things that, and I think it's good to talk about and just do in general. If you're a leader, I took a course one time and they said, like, instead of telling your employee or your manager what to do, ask them questions to kind of guide them and teach them how to go through the thought process. So the next time they encounter something like that, they don't necessarily need you to do that. They'll make a logical decision on that. And I find that this becomes even more difficult when you're in Zoom. We're in a Zoom culture, working very remotely or with people who aren't co-located with you. So for me personally, I put myself on mute a lot. That gives me an opportunity. Like, I have to very consciously unmute myself to be able to say something. So it gives me a moment of pause to think, like, do I need to interject at this point in time? Am I going to do something that's going to be more telling than guiding in that moment? But it's just really important for, I think, all of us as we're joining boards to really kind of change our mentality and approach as a board member. As, okay, you're not the boss anymore, you're there to assist. So I think that's something that's been a little bit of a challenge and a bit of a learning opportunity for myself, and I think for others as well.
I love the practical example you give is mute yourself, so that you have to take an action to speak, right? You have to take an action, and you'll think twice when you take an action. Very tangible, very practical, very helpful,
Yes.
Tokeshia. You think through that. As you were speaking, Tokeshia, I was thinking about how sometimes we talk about these preconceived ideas that we have around boards. If you are a child like of the 80s and 90s like me, a board is a group of men sitting around a table, right, drinking maybe their scotch sometimes, and having a discussion, walking out and going and having dinner at the end of the day. So a lot of that has changed, right? That idea of what a board is has changed. How has your idea of a board changed?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's still in the process of changing. There's still, I think, a little bit of that, good old boys kind of club, sitting around having scotches and things like that. And I think it's going to look a little bit differently for each of us, depending on what country we're located in, right? But I think, as businesses really start embracing the ideas of ESG and DEI and things like that, and understanding that there is, I mean, for some people, I will be very frank and honest, it's more a PR move to try to add more women or minorities or things like that don't look like their normal board members on. But I think as they're doing it, it's a good catalyst to get them to understand that, hey, having someone with a difference of ideas and opinions and experiences on the board is actually very, very helpful for us. So I think more companies are starting to embrace that as they're learning through those things. But for me, I will say, I didn't even know that being an advisor on a board was something that was possible until I encountered the Veblen program. So really just having that understanding that, you can be there as a junior member just to learn and observe and get to a point where you become, a paid advisory member or, NDE on a board. I will also say that, as an American person, my idea of what that traditional board looks like is different. I had a friend who, as a white male was like, oh gosh, diversity on boards, no one's going to hire me. I don't add diversity to boards, but forgetting that there's a whole world out there, and what that board looks like in China, in Canada, in Mexico, in Europe is going to be very different than how it might look here in the States. And then just also understand that like companies of all sizes need boards. I think most of us are thinking a board is a JP Morgan, is your Fortune 500 companies. Amazon has a board, right? But you're not thinking that, a very small organization that maybe has a couple of stores or, less than 50 employees would also benefit from having a board. So I think those are things that I've kind of really like taken a moment to go like, oh yeah, like this looks different for everyone.
Right. I love that. And especially like, you speak about every company deserves a board. I think that's really powerful, right? Taking it away from just the idea of what an established board looks like to saying, well, everyone deserves a board of advisors at least. Let's start there. And that's pretty powerful, Tokeshia, really powerful, actually. So, Tokeshia, you've alluded to the Veblen program along this podcast. And tell us about why you joined Veblen. What brought you to Veblen? And what have been some of your greatest learnings or some of your challenges at Veblen? We'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I came across Veblen, like a friend of mine was going to one of the Zoom introductory workshops where Callum was presenting what Veblen is and the opportunities it could bring to you. And it was actually very timely for me because, as I mentioned earlier, I've been really thinking about like, what do I want to do with when I grow up, and what does the next phase of my career look like? As much as I would love to like fully retire and to spend all of my time on vacation and lounging and things like that, the idea of being on a board, I think, was really interesting to me because it's like, okay, once I get to that point, or even now, how can I step outside the industry that I'm in? How can I add value in other ways? And then continue to keep myself occupied and, contributing to society. So I also joined the workshop and made a decision to join the Veblen program. I am a perfectionist and a type A personality all the way. So, the idea of joining a board, as is, was scary to me. And I'm like, oh, the opportunity to learn more about what is expected of me, what I need to do, so I can at least walk in with some knowledge, was very attractive to me and part of why I joined the program. And it's in and of itself. And what I find amazing about this program is the network. I have met some fantastic people here from all different industries, all different types of roles. I think primarily when the program first started, it was a lot of entrepreneurs and people who had their own businesses. But we very quickly over time added a lot more individual contributors everywhere from, managers, executives, all the way down to, individual contributors, different companies. And I think that's really great because it gives you, again, different perspectives and thoughts and ideas and the ability to learn from people. They're going to help hold you accountable in your development education through the program. What I would say for anyone thinking about this too, and I think for me, from a challenge perspective, is understanding that this is still like a newer program, right? So there is, the modules that we have to learn from. We get new different like books to read. We have a lot of really good conversations. We've got the coaching and all that other stuff, but there's still a lot of ability for us to help shape what this program looks like, which again, just is attractive to me in my business transformation, operational efficiency, mindset and things that I like to do. So, there's an opportunity for you coming on to help shape this program, provide Callum and the team with feedback about things that we could do to continue to grow and do things better. Arvashni, you're adding another educational monthly forum for us to kind of get together and really talk about ourselves, and how we can contribute better to the boards. I'm really looking forward to those sessions. And this is, again, what I want to add into that too, is this program really is going to be what you make of it. So like, if you really just want to do the modules and kind of learn through some things and maybe just business coaching, that's up to you. But there are a lot of opportunities for different forms of development in different areas that someone might need to grow in, or areas that you never thought you really need to think about needing to grow and develop in. And then the other thing I would say for people coming on is if you've never had to deal with people outside of the US or in different areas and things like that, it's a great opportunity to learn how people work differently culturally in the business world. Like I said, working at JP Morgan, that's a global organization. So I've had that opportunity, but not everybody else has. So I find it really interesting to see how people are adjusting, adapting to that in their role. So it's another opportunity to grow and develop who you are in that way as well.
Awesome. No, I totally agree with you in the value the program has is bringing and continues to bring. And I think the first thing, to your point is I love the community that it's built. Because we've gotten to know, when we're almost at close to 100 folks that are on the program at this point in time, and you've gotten to have access to this incredible entrepreneurial, highly qualified, highly skilled, highly experienced group of people as well. So that's fantastic. And to your point as well, I mean, Europe, shining example of this, where you actually do have the opportunity to secure advisory roles or non-executive director roles on boards. So the program offers you the ability to build a community while securing advisory roles and things along the way. So I love that.
Yeah.
I think also, Tokeshia, as you were talking, something that you said around how you guide, how you share information with people, just got me thinking about how often we become so attached to the outcome, right? It must go in a certain way, that we forget our jobs are actually just to be disciplined in how we share and how we guide, but never to get attached in the outcome of something. Because the company will decide to go in a certain way, but as long as you sharing your thoughts, and share with me a little bit around how you think about that. You shared the practical, tangible example of not doing, but listening, right? How do you detach yourself from the outcome of an event versus the guidance that you may give?
I don't know if you ever fully detach yourself, from the outcome. You're invested, right? Like hopefully if you're on the board, you really care about that company and what they're doing and things like that. And you're hoping you're giving them guidance. I know not everyone has children. But for those of us that do have children, I think you kind of have to look at it from that same lens, right? Like you go through a phase where you tell them what to do and things like that, and then you start transitioning as they get older into a phase of where you're hoping you're guiding them and giving them the knowledge and information that when they go out into the world, be it in high school, if they're riding their bikes around the block, getting a job, going off to college, that you've given them enough information and guided them in such a way that they will be able to make good decisions. And you have to accept the fact that maybe that decision is not the decision that you would have made.
Right.
But it's not necessarily a bad decision. I do that, and you think about that too, as a manager of managers. You guide your employees in such a way, if you're doing it right, you're guiding your employees in such a way that you can trust that they will go out and make decisions without having to check in with you every single time they do that. And those decisions are going to give a good outcome. But then also understanding that sometimes it's not going to. Sometimes they're going to make a decision and go in a direction that they felt was the best one. And maybe it wasn't the best decision, but then they'll come back here and talk to you about it and then go through some learnings, and maybe will listen a little bit differently than they had the time before, right? Because everybody I do it myself. I go through, I know better. My experience says this. But that's, I think, the beauty of being on a board and having differences of opinions and difference of ways of doing things. If you have a spouse, your spouse does not do dishes the way you're going to do dishes, does not clean the bathroom the way you're going to clean the bathroom. Doesn't mean it's not clean.
Or does not stack the dishwasher the way you would stack
exactly.
the dishwasher. No, Tokeshia, there's so much of value and wisdom in what you've said as well. And I love your example about how you can only guide your children, right? But you've got to trust that the decisions that will be made are agnostic to you, but will be best for them in time. Right. So I love that. So before we wrap up, Tokeshia, I've just realized we've spoken so much about Tokeshia as your journey, your journey as a advisory board member, and as your journey as a web learner. But what does Tokeshia do for fun? Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So like I mentioned, I read a lot. I love to read. I can read all day long, if given the opportunity to do it. And all kinds of books. This year, I'm really trying to stretch myself and get into books that I might not have read otherwise and do things a little bit differently. But I enjoy that. Like I said, I mentioned I have my family. I spend a lot of time with my kids, and we like to go out on adventures on a regular basis. My kids are very involved in sports and other things like that, so I love to support them in that. And then on top of that, outside of having a fantastic family that's close by that I can spend time with, I'm very fortunate that way. I have a fantastic group of friends that I get to spend a lot of time. They're my own personal advisory board that I deal with all the time. One of our husbands jokes very frequently that he calls us the WhatsApp Council, which is, I think, just I love the name, because he's like, take it to the council, and we'll go and we'll talk and share. So it's a very supportive group of women that I love dearly. I've known for a very long period of time. And we've just seen and support each other through all of the things. So I love spending time with them. And then, just the general life stuff, right? Like, as a homeowner, there's always things to be done, projects and things to do. I actually really love cooking and like building things and, you know, trying to find solutions to problems in my own house. I'm the handy one in the house, so anything needs to be done and fixed, I'll work on those things as well. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of boring uh, a lot of times, but I think that's just the life of a 40 something year old. You get to a point where you're kind of in a groove of um, pockets of excitement, but a lot of the mundane.
That's life, right? Finding
Yep.
joy in the mundane as well as you go
Yes.
along with it. And I think far from boring, Tokeshia, because I mean, your journey is incredible. The learnings have been incredible. And this has been incredible, just listening to you and getting to learn a little bit about who Tokeshia Schroeder is and what her advisory board journey looks like. So, Tokeshia, just to sum it up, the three things that have really struck me as you've spoken is I love what you said. Every company deserves a board, right? Every company deserves a board, and I think that's the call to action as well. Is how many companies are we speaking to say, hey, do you have a board? Would you like one? Right? To get people to recognize how much talent actually exists in the world that want to help companies grow and develop and be really successful. So it's a big call to action to speak to smaller companies and say, here's something I think you can do. So that's like the first one. The second thing that I loved, and you and I have spoken about this previously as well, is practical examples. If you don't talk, put yourselves on mute. So you have to do something to unmute. I think that's a real tangible that a lot of our listeners can take away as well. And as we've spoken through this, I loved your example about your son, how you guide and you learn and you share thoughts, but you have to let people make their own decisions and you have to let your child make his or her own decisions. And I think that's, as you shared, is very similar to an organization as well. You share, you guide, but ultimately the organization will make the right decisions. And how do you detach yourself from the decision, knowing that you've done your best in the guidance? Three extremely key nuggets of wisdom, Tokeshia. So at the outset, we said we were going to ask you all these questions and pick your brain so we can gain some nuggets of wisdom that will help shape our own success as on this advisory journey or on this board journey. And I think you've shared three incredibly powerful things. Everyone deserves a board. Put yourself on mute and recognize that your guidance should be agnostic of the result, because whatever the result is will be the result. So Tokeshia, I think we've come to the end of our podcast today, but I want to thank you for sharing your journey, sharing your time, sharing your knowledge and expertise, and tell you it has been absolutely wonderful to speak to you, to listen to you, and to hear your journey as well. And for our listeners, I'd like to say thank you very much for joining us on this podcast. Invite you to join us on our podcasts that are coming down in the next, couple of weeks and months as well, where you will hear from another host, and you will get to hear from another talented leader like Tokeshia as well. So join us on the next Candid Coffee with whoever our next guest is going to be. Tokeshia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Arvashni. I appreciate it.
Awesome.